The priest had just asked if anyone objected to our marriage when a woman I'd never seen before stood up in the back row and said, "I object, because he's already my husband." For a second I thought I had misheard her. The church had been completely silent moments earlier. Soft music echoed from the speakers. Sunlight poured through the stained glass windows. My fiancée, Emily, was holding my hands and smiling through tears. Then those words shattered everything. "I object, because he's already my husband." Every head in the church turned. The priest froze. The musicians stopped playing. Even the photographers lowered their cameras. I remember hearing someone drop a champagne glass near the reception entrance. The crash sounded impossibly loud. My heart began hammering against my chest. "What?" I said. The woman stepped forward from the back row. She looked to be around my age. Maybe 28 or 30. She was wearing a simple white dress. Not a wedding gown, but white. The color choice alone made several guests start whispering. Emily tightened her grip on my hands. I could feel her trembling. The woman looked directly at me. Not angrily. Not dramatically. Almost sadly. Like someone looking at a person who had broken their heart. "You know exactly who I am," she said. "No," I replied immediately. "I don't." The room erupted. Guests began talking over each other. Emily's father stood up. My mother looked like she was about to faint. Someone near the back started recording with their phone. The woman reached into her purse. At that moment, panic hit me. Because even though I had absolutely no idea who she was, she didn't look confused. She didn't look mistaken. She looked certain. Terrifyingly certain. "I didn't want to do this," she said. Her voice cracked. "But you left me no choice." Emily let go of my hands. I turned toward her. "Emily, I swear to you, I've never seen this woman before." She didn't answer. She was staring at the stranger. Then at me. Then back at the stranger. The fear in her eyes was unlike anything I'd ever seen. The woman slowly pulled a folded document from her purse. Then another. Then several photographs. My stomach dropped. Because whatever she was holding, she clearly believed it would prove her story. The priest stepped away from us. The wedding coordinator rushed toward the altar. Guests stood from their seats. Some looked shocked. Others looked fascinated. Like they were watching a movie unfold in real time. I desperately wished it was a movie. Because then none of it would be real. The woman walked down the center aisle. One slow step at a time. Toward me. Toward my bride. Toward the life we had spent 2 years building together. And with every step she took, I felt my future slipping further away. When she reached the front, she stopped just a few feet from us. Then she looked directly at Emily. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Then she turned to everyone else. And raised the documents. The church became silent again. The kind of silence that only exists before disaster. I didn't know it then. But the next few hours would destroy friendships, expose family secrets buried for decades, reveal a lie that had shaped my entire life, and uncover a betrayal so devastating that even now I struggle to talk about it. And the worst part? The woman wasn't lying. At least not entirely. Before I tell you what happened next, I need to explain how I got there. Because 6 hours earlier, I believed I was the luckiest man alive. My name is Daniel. At the time, I was 29 years old. I worked as a financial consultant. Nothing exciting. Nothing glamorous. Just a stable career and a normal life. Then I met Emily. People always talk about love at first sight. I never believed in it until I saw her. We met at a bookstore. I reached for a novel at the same time she did. Our hands touched. We laughed. The conversation lasted 30 minutes. Our first date lasted 6 hours. After that, we were inseparable. Emily was everything I wasn't. She was spontaneous, adventurous, fearlessly honest. She had this ability to make everyone around her feel important. Even complete strangers. Within a year, I knew I wanted to marry her. By year 2, I proposed. It happened during a weekend trip to the mountains. Nothing extravagant. No flash mob. No expensive photographer hiding in the bushes. Just the two of us watching the sunset. She said yes before I even finished asking. I still remember her crying and laughing at the same time. It was one of the happiest moments of my life. The wedding planning began immediately. Our families became involved. Maybe too involved. My mother wanted a traditional ceremony. Emily's mother wanted something modern. Every week brought a new argument about flowers, food, music, seating charts, or decorations. But none of it seemed important. Not compared to what we were building together. Or so I thought. Looking back now, there were warning signs. Tiny things. The kind of details you ignore because they seem insignificant. For example, my father acted strangely whenever wedding paperwork came up. Marriage licenses. Legal documents. Family records. Anything official. He would change the subject. Leave the room. Or suddenly remember an urgent phone call. At first I thought nothing of it. My father had always been private. Then there was my best friend, Ryan. We've known each other since childhood. He was supposed to be my best man. Yet during the final month before the wedding he seemed nervous. Distracted. Every time I mentioned how excited I was, he'd force a smile. I assumed he was dealing with personal problems. I never pushed him. That was mistake number 2. Mistake number 1 happened 3 weeks before the wedding. I received a strange email. No subject line. No signature. Just a single sentence. Ask your family who you really are. That was it. Nothing else. I laughed and deleted it. Some internet troll. At least that's what I convinced myself. A week later, another message arrived. This one contained only a date. July 17, 1998. I didn't recognize it. Neither did Emily. So I ignored that one too. But the messages continued. Always anonymous. Always cryptic. Never threatening. Just strange. One evening Emily asked if I was worried. I told her no. Honestly, I wasn't. My life was straightforward. No criminal past. No secret children. No hidden marriages. Nothing. I had absolutely nothing to hide. At least that's what I believed. The week before the wedding passed in a blur. Family dinners. Final fittings. Vendor meetings. Rehearsals. Everyone seemed happy. Everyone seemed excited. Everyone seemed ready. Except my father. The night before the ceremony, I found him sitting alone in the hotel bar. Staring into a glass of whiskey. He looked exhausted. Older somehow. I sat beside him. You okay? I asked. He nodded. Too quickly. Just emotional. About the wedding? Something like that. I remember laughing. You sound like you're attending a funeral. His expression changed. Just for a second. A flash of guilt. Maybe both. Then it disappeared. He forced a smile. You'll understand someday. Those words stayed with me. Even as I stood at the altar the next morning. Even as I watched Emily walk down the aisle. Even as every guest smiled and celebrated. And even as I prepared to say the vows that would change my life forever. Because deep down, something felt off. Not enough to stop the wedding. Not enough to raise alarm. Just enough to create a small knot of anxiety in my stomach. A feeling that something was coming. Something I couldn't explain. The ceremony began. The music played. Emily reached the altar. The priest started speaking. Everything was perfect. Until the exact moment it wasn't. Because just as the priest asked whether anyone objected, I heard movement near the entrance. I turned around and saw the church doors slowly opening. Then the church doors opened. The sound of the church doors opening echoed through the sanctuary. At first, nobody paid much attention. A few guests glanced over their shoulders, probably assuming someone had arrived late. That wasn't unusual. There are always a few late arrivals at weddings. But then the woman stepped inside. And everything changed. The first thing I noticed was the white dress. Not a wedding gown. Not something flashy or dramatic. Just a simple white dress that immediately stood out among the dark suits and colorful dresses worn by everyone else. The second thing I noticed was her face. She looked terrified. Not angry. Not confident. Terrified. Like someone walking into a burning building because they had no other choice. The church gradually became silent. The priest stopped speaking. Emily squeezed my hand. I remember feeling confused more than anything else. I thought maybe she was at the wrong wedding. Maybe she had mistaken the church for another venue. It seemed like the only logical explanation. The woman slowly walked down the center aisle. Every eye in the building followed her. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes were red. As if she had been crying for hours. When she reached the middle of the church, she stopped. The priest cleared his throat. Miss, can I help you? For a moment she didn't answer. She simply stared at me. Directly at me. The intensity of her gaze made my skin crawl. Then she spoke. The priest just asked if anyone objects. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. I object. The words landed like a bomb. A collective gasp filled the room. Emily's grip tightened around my hand. The woman swallowed hard. Then she delivered the sentence that destroyed my wedding. I object because he's already my husband. The entire church erupted. People stood from their seats. Whispers exploded across the room. Someone near the back shouted, "What?" Another guest dropped their phone. Emily immediately released my hand. I turned toward her. Her face had gone completely white. Emily. What is she talking about? She whispered. I don't know. The answer sounded pathetic even to me. Because it was true. I had absolutely no idea what was happening. The woman took another step forward. Tears rolled down her cheeks. You promised me you'd never leave. The church became even louder. Emily's mother jumped to her feet. What kind of sick joke is this? My mother looked horrified. My father looked something else entirely. The expression lasted only a second. But I saw it. And for some reason, that frightened me more than anything the woman had said. The priest raised his hands. Everyone please remain calm. Nobody listened. Emily turned toward me. Her eyes searched mine desperately, looking for reassurance, looking for certainty, looking for proof that none of this was real. I've never seen her before, I said. The woman laughed bitterly. You've never seen me before? No. Daniel, look at me. I stared at her. Nothing. No recognition. No memory. No connection. She was a complete stranger. I don't know who you are. The pain that crossed her face looked genuine, almost heartbreaking. For a brief moment, I actually felt guilty, which made absolutely no sense, because I had done nothing wrong. The woman reached into her purse. Emily immediately stepped backward. What is she doing? Several guests moved protectively in front of their children. For a second, everyone seemed worried she might pull out a weapon. Instead, she removed a stack of papers. Then several photographs. Then a small leather folder. My stomach tightened, because whatever she was holding, she clearly believed it would prove everything. Emily's father stormed toward her. I think you've embarrassed yourself enough. The woman ignored him. Her eyes never left mine. You really don't remember me? No. Her voice cracked. Then somebody lied to both of us. Those words silenced the room. Even the whispers stopped. Somehow that statement felt different. Less like an accusation. More like a warning. Emily looked at the documents. Then back at me. Then back at the woman. I could see her trying to make sense of the situation. Trying to find a reasonable explanation. But every second that passed made things worse. The woman slowly opened the leather folder. Inside were several official-looking documents. I couldn't read them from where I stood, but I noticed something strange. They looked old. Very old. The paper was slightly yellow. The edges were worn, like they had been handled many times. She carefully removed the first document, then held it up. I didn't come here to ruin your wedding. The guests laughed sarcastically. She ignored them. I came because I finally learned where he was. A chill ran down my spine. Learn where I was? What did that even mean? Emily folded her arms. If you're telling the truth, prove it. The woman nodded, almost as if she'd been waiting for that challenge. She turned toward the guests, then toward the priest, then finally toward me. I spent 3 years looking for him. 3 years. The number hit me strangely. Why would a complete stranger spend 3 years searching for me? Nothing about this situation made sense. She removed another photograph from the folder. My pulse quickened. The room became so quiet that I could hear the air conditioning humming overhead. The woman held the photograph against her chest. For a moment, it looked like she was struggling emotionally, like showing it hurt her. Then she looked directly at Emily. I'm sorry. Emily didn't respond. The woman took a deep breath. Then she raised the photograph into the air. Every guest leaned forward. Every conversation stopped. Every eye focused on the image. Even from a distance, I could tell it was old. The colors were faded. The corners were worn. But whatever was in that photograph instantly changed the expression on the woman's face. She looked certain. Completely certain. And suddenly, for the first time since she had entered the church, I felt real fear. Because she wasn't acting like someone making things up. She wasn't acting like a scammer. She wasn't acting like a liar. She looked like someone holding proof. The kind of proof that destroys lives. Emily's voice shook. What is that? The woman swallowed. Then she answered. A wedding photograph. My heart stopped. The church exploded again. People shouted. Guests stood on chairs trying to see. The priest looked stunned. Emily staggered backward. I felt like the floor beneath me had disappeared. A wedding photograph? Impossible. Absolutely impossible. I had never been married. Never even engaged before Emily. The woman slowly turned the photograph around so everyone could see. I couldn't make out the details yet, but judging by the reactions spreading through the crowd, the image was devastating. Several guests covered their mouths. Others stared directly at me, as if seeing me for the first time. Emily looked ready to collapse. And somewhere behind me, I heard my father whisper a single word. No. Not angry. Not confused. Terrified. The woman finally looked directly at me. Tears streamed down her face. Then she said the words that would turn my entire life upside down. If you don't recognize me. She raised the photograph higher. Then maybe you'll recognize this. Then she showed everyone the photograph. The moment the woman turned the photograph around, the entire church leaned forward. At first, I couldn't see it clearly. People were standing. Guests were moving into the aisle. The photographers had abandoned their positions near the altar and were trying to get a closer look. Then the woman walked directly toward the front row. She handed the photograph to the priest. The priest studied it for several seconds. His expression changed immediately. The color drained from his face. My stomach twisted. That reaction alone was enough to terrify me. The priest slowly looked up, then looked at me, then back at the photograph, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Emily noticed it too. What is it? She demanded. The priest hesitated. I think everyone needs to remain calm. Show me. The woman handed Emily another copy. Emily grabbed it with trembling hands. The moment she looked at the photograph, she froze. Her entire body became rigid. The church fell silent. I could hear my own heartbeat. Emily. I whispered. She didn't answer. Emily. Slowly, she lifted her eyes toward me. There were tears in them. And fear. A level of fear I'd never seen before. Then she turned the photograph around. The second I saw it, my knees nearly gave out. It was a wedding picture. A bride stood smiling beside a groom. The groom looked exactly like me. Not similar. Not close. Exactly like me. The same eyes. The same jawline. The same smile. The same face. It was as if someone had taken one of my photographs and inserted it into a wedding album. The church erupted. People shouted. Someone screamed. My mother covered her mouth. Emily staggered backward. This isn't possible, I whispered. The woman stared at me. You see him now? I couldn't breathe. Because I wasn't looking at a stranger. I was looking at myself. Or someone who looked so much like me that the difference was impossible to spot. The photograph appeared old. Several years old. The date printed in the corner showed a wedding that had supposedly happened 5 years earlier. 5 years. I had never been married. I knew that. Yet somehow there was a photograph proving otherwise. The woman removed another document. A marriage certificate. She handed it directly to Emily. The church became quiet again. Everyone watched as Emily examined it. Then her face collapsed. The certificate contained my name. My full name. Daniel James Carter. The same name printed on my driver's license. The same name on my passport. The same name on every legal document I'd ever owned. My hands started shaking. This is fake. The woman didn't respond. Instead, she pulled out another folder. Inside were dozens of papers. Bank statements. Insurance forms. Utility bills. Tax records. Every single one connected her to someone named Daniel Carter. Or at least someone pretending to be me. The evidence kept coming. One document after another. Each one making the situation worse. Each one looking completely legitimate. Emily stared at the stack of paperwork. Then looked at me. The doubt in her eyes hurt more than anything. Because I understood it. If our positions were reversed, I'd probably be doubting her too. The evidence was overwhelming. And I had absolutely no explanation. I swear to God, I said. I don't know this woman. Nobody answered. The silence was brutal. The woman reached into her purse one final time. Then she pulled out her phone. My stomach dropped. Because I knew whatever came next would be even worse. She opened a photo gallery. Hundreds of pictures appeared. Pictures of vacations, restaurants, birthdays, holidays, years of memories. All featuring the same man. The same face from the wedding photograph. My face. Or something impossibly close to it. Guests began passing the phone around. Every reaction was the same. Confusion. Disbelief. Emily looked like she was falling apart. The woman finally spoke again. Do you still claim you've never met me? I haven't. Then explain him. I can't. Exactly. The room exploded with whispers. My father remained silent. That bothered me more than anything else. He wasn't defending me. Wasn't questioning the evidence. Wasn't demanding answers. He just sat there. Terrified. As if he already knew something. As if he'd been expecting this day. My eyes found him immediately. Dad. He didn't answer. Dad. Still nothing. For the first time in my life, he refused to look at me. And that scared me more than the evidence. Emily noticed it too. Her eyes narrowed. Why won't your father say anything? No response. The woman turned toward him. And suddenly her expression changed. Recognition. Real recognition. My father's face turned white. The woman's eyes widened. You. The single word echoed through the church. My father immediately stood. No. The woman took a step toward him. You know who I am. No. You're lying. The entire room shifted. Until that moment, everyone had been focused on me. Now attention was moving elsewhere. Toward my father. Toward the one person who looked more frightened than I did. The woman pointed directly at him. I've seen you before. My father looked like he was about to collapse. The priest stepped between them. Perhaps everyone should calm down. But nobody was listening anymore. Emily stared at my father. Then at me. Then back at him. A horrifying possibility was beginning to form. One I wasn't ready to consider. The woman opened another folder. This time, she removed printed messages. Emails. Text conversations. Letters. Years of communication. All supposedly exchanged between her and me. She began reading them aloud. Private conversations. Romantic messages. Plans for the future. Discussions about buying a house. Arguments. Apologies. Promises. Years of a relationship. The church listened in stunned silence. The messages sounded authentic. Human. Not something fabricated overnight. They painted the picture of a marriage. A troubled marriage. But a marriage nonetheless. Emily couldn't take it anymore. Tears streamed down her face. Stop. The woman lowered the papers. Emily looked at me. For a moment, I thought she might ask for an explanation. Instead, she asked something much worse. Is there anything you haven't told me? The question shattered my heart. Because she genuinely wasn't sure anymore. The trust we'd spent years building was collapsing in real time. No. She stared at me, searching my face. Looking for certainty. Looking for truth. Looking for something she could hold on to. But all she found was confusion. And confusion looked a lot like guilt. Emily slowly removed her engagement ring. The sight made my chest tighten. No, I whispered. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I don't know what's happening. Neither do I. That's the problem. Her voice broke. The church watched silently. Nobody wanted to intervene. Nobody knew what to say. Because the evidence was sitting right there. Photographs. Documents. Messages. Years of records. Everything pointed toward one conclusion. And I was the only person insisting it wasn't true. Emily closed her eyes. Then she placed the ring in my hand. The metal felt cold. Heavier than it should have. I need time. My heart stopped. Emily. I need time. She turned away. I watched the woman instinctively reach toward her. Wait. Emily pulled away. Don't. The single word was filled with pain. The woman lowered her hand. Looking genuinely ashamed. For a second I realized something strange. She wasn't enjoying this. She wasn't trying to humiliate anyone. She looked devastated. Like she wished none of this was happening. Like she had come seeking answers rather than revenge. Emily walked down the aisle. Her parents followed immediately. Half the guests stood to leave with them. The ceremony was over. Destroyed in less than 10 minutes. I watched helplessly as the woman I loved disappeared through the church doors. Every plan. Every dream. Every promise. Gone. The church felt empty despite being full of people. The mysterious woman stood quietly near the altar. The evidence remained spread across several pews. The guests whispered among themselves. And I stood there holding an engagement ring that no longer belonged on my finger. Then something happened. Something that changed everything. One of the older guests stepped forward. A retired attorney named Mr. Reynolds. He had known my family for years. He carefully examined one of the documents. Then another. Then another. His expression darkened. Finally, he looked up. And spoke the sentence that would launch me into the darkest investigation of my life. This paperwork is real. The church became silent. Mr. Reynolds adjusted his glasses. Then added 7 words that made my blood run cold. But something about it is impossible. The church fell silent after Mr. Reynolds spoke. But something about it is impossible. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even the whispers stopped. Mr. Reynolds had spent nearly 40 years as an attorney. He wasn't the type of man who made dramatic statements for attention. He was respected, careful, and painfully precise with his words. So when he said something was impossible, everyone listened. Including me. What do you mean? I asked. He adjusted his glasses and looked down at the documents again. The marriage certificate appears authentic. The woman nodded. Because it is. Mr. Reynolds continued. The bank records appear authentic. Again, she nodded. The insurance forms appear authentic. The church became painfully quiet. Then he looked directly at me. But according to these documents, your marriage occurred on July 17, 2018. My stomach tightened. That date. I had seen it before. The anonymous message. The strange email. The date that meant nothing to me. Or at least I thought it meant nothing. Mr. Reynolds continued. The problem is that Daniel couldn't have been at this wedding. Everyone stared at him. Why not? Emily's father asked. Mr. Reynolds looked at me. Because on July 17, 2018, Daniel was in another state. The room erupted again. What? How do you know that? Mr. Reynolds pointed toward me. I represented his company during a contract dispute that week. Daniel attended meetings in Denver. I remember because he testified in person. The woman's face changed. Confusion. Real confusion. For the first time since she arrived, certainty seemed to disappear from her eyes. No, she whispered. Mr. Reynolds nodded. I have records proving it. My heart started racing. Finally, something that supported my side of the story. But relief didn't last long. Because the woman looked genuinely shocked. Not caught. Not exposed. Like she had just learned something herself. She slowly looked down at the marriage certificate. Then back at me. Then back at the certificate. What are you saying? Mr. Reynolds folded his arms. I'm saying one of two things happened. The church waited. Either this document is fraudulent. He paused. Or somebody used Daniel's identity. The words hit me like a truck. Identity. The anonymous emails. The strange date. My father's behavior. The woman's certainty. Suddenly everything felt connected. But I still couldn't see how. The woman lowered herself into a pew. Looking pale. Almost sick. For several minutes nobody spoke. The chaos from earlier had transformed into something else. A mystery. A terrifying mystery. Because if the woman wasn't lying, and I wasn't lying, then someone else had to be. Eventually, guests began leaving. The wedding was over. Destroyed. The reception was cancelled. The photographers packed their equipment. The florist began removing decorations. Everything Emily and I had spent months planning disappeared in a matter of hours. I barely noticed. My mind was focused on one thing. Finding answers. The woman remained in the church. Alone. Staring at the documents. I finally approached her. For the first time all day, we spoke privately. My name is Daniel. She laughed softly. I know. No. I mean the real Daniel. Her eyes filled with tears. My name is Sarah. I sat across from her. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then I asked the question that had been haunting me all day. Who did you marry? Sarah looked down at the wedding photograph. I thought it was you. The answer sent chills through me. She wasn't pretending. I could see it. Everything she believed had been shattered just as completely as my wedding. I need to know everything, I said. And that's when Sarah told me her story. 5 years earlier, she had met a man named Daniel Carter. My name. He looked exactly like me. Sounded like me. Used my birthday. My address. My identity. According to Sarah, their relationship lasted nearly 2 years. Then they got married. For a while, everything seemed normal. Then strange things began happening. The man disappeared for days at a time. He constantly changed jobs. He avoided photographs whenever possible. He refused to discuss his family. Whenever Sarah asked questions, he became defensive. Then one day he vanished completely. No explanation. No warning. No goodbye. Just gone. Sarah spent years searching for him. Hiring investigators. Following leads. Chasing dead ends. Eventually, one investigator found my engagement announcement online. The moment Sarah saw my photograph, she was convinced she had found her husband. And that belief brought her to my wedding. The more she talked, the more disturbed I became. Because every detail sounded genuine. Too genuine. Someone had stolen my identity. Not briefly. Not casually. For years. After leaving the church, I drove directly to my parents' house. I needed answers. Specifically from my father. When I arrived, his car was already there. The lights were on. I stormed inside. He was sitting alone in the living room. Waiting. Almost as if he knew I was coming. Who is Sarah? His face tightened. I don't know. Stop lying. Silence. Dad. Nothing. I threw the wedding photograph onto the coffee table. His eyes immediately found it. The reaction lasted less than a second. But it was enough. Recognition. He recognized it. My blood boiled. You've seen that before. No. You're lying. His shoulders slumped. For the first time in my life, my father looked defeated. Broken. Like a man carrying something heavy for far too long. I was trying to protect you. The sentence froze me. Protect me? From what? My mother entered the room. The second she sensed the tension, she stopped. Fear crossed her face. Not confusion. Fear. The same fear I'd seen in my father earlier. And suddenly I knew. They both knew something. Something huge. Something connected to Sarah. Something connected to me. My voice shook. What aren't you telling me? Neither answered. The silence became unbearable. Finally, my mother sat down. Her hands trembled. Tears filled her eyes. Then she whispered something that changed everything. Daniel. She paused. As if saying the words would destroy the world around her. Maybe it did. There are things about your childhood you don't know. The room spun. My childhood? What did that have to do with any of this? My father closed his eyes. Almost like he had spent years dreading this moment. My mother looked at him. Then back at me. And for the first time in my life, I saw genuine guilt in her eyes. Not embarrassment. Not regret. Guilt. The kind of guilt people carry for decades. The kind that never disappears. The kind that destroys families. My heart pounded. What things? Neither answered immediately. Instead, they exchanged a look. A look that told me everything before they even spoke. Whatever secret they were hiding. It was bigger than Sarah. Bigger than my ruined wedding. Bigger than identity theft. And somehow, impossibly, it involved me. Then my father stood up. Walked toward a locked cabinet. And removed a small metal box. A box I had never seen before. His hands shook as he carried it back to the table. My stomach dropped. Because I knew. Deep down in it, whatever was inside that box had been hidden for years. Maybe decades. And once it was opened, nothing would ever be the same again. My father placed the box in front of me. Then he said 6 words that made my blood run cold. "You're not who you think you are." The room felt impossibly small after my father spoke. "You're not who you think you are." For several seconds, I honestly thought I had misheard him. My mind was already overwhelmed. My wedding had been destroyed. A stranger claimed to be my wife. Someone had apparently stolen my identity. And now my father was telling me I wasn't who I thought I was. I stared at him. What does that even mean? Neither of my parents answered. The metal box sat on the coffee table between us. Silent, heavy, terrifying. My father slowly opened it. Inside were dozens of documents. Old photographs. Hospital records. Newspaper clippings. Legal papers. Files that looked decades old. My mother began crying before I even touched them. That scared me more than anything. Because whatever was inside that box wasn't just a secret. It was a wound. One that had never healed. My father removed a yellow folder. The edges were worn. Like it had been opened many times over the years. He handed it to me. My hands trembled as I opened it. The first document nearly stopped my heart. A birth certificate. At first glance, it looked normal. Then I noticed the name. The baby listed on the document wasn't Daniel Carter. It was someone else. A different first name. A different last name. I looked up immediately. "What is this?" My father couldn't meet my eyes. My mother answered instead. "Your original birth certificate." The room spun. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was impossible. "What are you talking about? You weren't born Daniel Carter." My pulse hammered inside my ears. I looked back at the document. The date matched my birthday. The hospital matched the city where I was born. Everything matched except the name. The realization made me sick. "No." My father finally spoke. "We adopted you." The words hung in the air. I stared at him. Then at my mother. Then back at the document. Adopted. I had spent 29 years believing these people were my biological parents. 29 years. And now, less than 24 hours after my wedding collapsed, I was learning my entire identity might be built on a lie. My mother reached for my hand. I pulled away. Not because I hated her. Because I couldn't process anything. "Why didn't you tell me?" Tears streamed down her face. "We wanted to." "When?" No answer. 20 years ago? Silence. 10 years ago? More silence. The truth was obvious. They had never planned to tell me. Ever. My father leaned forward. The adoption itself isn't the problem. The way he said it made my stomach drop. If adoption wasn't the problem, then what was? He removed another file. This one looked even older. Inside were newspaper articles. Most were faded. Some were partially damaged. One headline immediately caught my attention. Local hospital investigated following infant record discrepancies. My heart stopped. I grabbed the article. The story described a scandal involving hospital records from nearly 30 years earlier. Missing paperwork. Incorrect birth certificates. Administrative errors. Several families had reportedly received incorrect information about newborn children. I looked at my father. "What does this have to do with me?" His answer changed everything. "You weren't the only baby involved." The room became silent. I felt a chill run through my body. "What are you saying?" My father's voice cracked. "We believe another child was switched with you." I couldn't breathe. Another child. Another identity. Another life. Suddenly, Sarah's story came rushing back. A man with my face. My name. My identity. The marriage certificate. The photographs. The years of confusion. My mind began connecting dots I didn't want to connect. "No." My father closed his eyes. "We think the man Sarah married may be that child." The words hit me like a train. I stood so quickly that my chair crashed backward. The room tilted. For several seconds, I thought I might pass out. Because suddenly everything made horrifying sense. The resemblance. The shared identity. The matching records. The impossible evidence. If another child had somehow become connected to my birth records years ago, then maybe Sarah wasn't lying. Maybe she had married someone who genuinely believed he was me. Someone who had spent his entire life carrying my identity. My mother sobbed quietly. "We never knew for certain." I stared at her. "What do you mean?" "The hospital records disappeared." My father nodded. Several files were destroyed. Destroyed? He looked away. Or hidden. That answer felt worse. Much worse. Because destroyed records suggested an accident. Hidden records suggested intention. Someone had covered something up. Someone had buried the truth. For decades. I sat down slowly. My head felt like it was going to explode. Who knew about this? Neither parent answered immediately. Then my father whispered a name. And my blood ran cold. Ryan. My best friend. The same Ryan who had been acting strangely for months. The same Ryan who looked nervous every time the wedding was mentioned. The same Ryan who was supposed to stand beside me as best man. I stared at my father. What does Ryan have to do with this? My father hesitated. Then I opened another folder. Inside was a photograph. A very old photograph. Two boys stood together. One was me. Or at least I thought it was me. The second boy looked so similar that it was terrifying. Like looking at a reflection. My heart nearly stopped. The photograph had clearly been taken when we were children. Maybe 6 or 7 years old. I had never seen it before. But someone in the picture immediately stood out. Ryan. He was standing beside us. Smiling. My stomach twisted. No. My father nodded. Ryan knows who the other boy is. Every nerve in my body screamed. For months, Ryan had been acting nervous. Avoiding conversations. Looking guilty. And now I knew why. He wasn't hiding a personal problem. He was hiding a family secret. A secret tied directly to me. To Sarah. To the mysterious man who had stolen my identity. To the collapse of my wedding. I grabbed my car keys immediately. My father stood. Daniel, wait. No. You need to calm down. Did Ryan know before today? Neither parent answered. That silence was enough. My heart shattered. Because Ryan wasn't just my best friend. He was practically family. We grew up together. Shared everything. Trusted each other completely. And somehow he had known. Maybe for years. Maybe forever. I drove to Ryan's apartment faster than I should have. The entire trip felt unreal. Like I was trapped inside someone else's nightmare. When I arrived, his car was already there. Lights glowed through the windows. He was home. Because I needed answers. And for the first time since the wedding began, I knew exactly where to find them. I pounded on the door. No response. I knocked again. Harder. Still nothing. Then I noticed something strange. The door wasn't fully closed. It was slightly open. Just enough to reveal darkness inside. A terrible feeling settled in my stomach. Slowly, I pushed the door open. Ryan. Silence. The apartment was empty. But he hadn't left voluntarily. I knew that immediately. Furniture was overturned. Papers were scattered everywhere. Several drawers had been pulled open. Someone had searched the apartment. Recently. Violently. My pulse exploded. I stepped inside. And that's when I saw it. A single photograph lying on the floor. Waiting. The same photograph from my parents' box. The one showing two identical boys. Except this time, someone had written a message across it in red ink. 3 words. 3 words that made my blood freeze. He knows now. I stood frozen in Ryan's apartment, staring at the message written across the photograph. He knows now. The words looked fresh. The red ink hadn't fully dried. Whoever had written them had been here recently. Very recently. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it echoing in my ears. Ryan. I called his name again. Nothing. The apartment remained silent. A terrible feeling settled over me. Ryan wasn't avoiding me. Something had happened. I immediately pulled out my phone and called him. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail. Voicemail. The same result every time. I looked around the apartment. The place had been torn apart. Cushions ripped open. Cabinets emptied. Documents scattered across the floor. Whoever had searched this place wasn't looking for money. They were looking for information. And judging by the chaos, they had found something important. Then my eyes landed on a notebook lying beneath a broken lamp. Most of the pages had been torn out. Only a few remained. I picked it up. The first page contained a list of names. Sarah's. My father's. Emily's. Several names I didn't recognize. And one name circled repeatedly. Thomas Walker. I had never heard the name before. But Ryan clearly had. Because beneath it he had written 3 words. Find him first. A chill ran down my spine. Who is Thomas Walker? And why was Ryan trying to find him? I flipped through the remaining pages. Most were filled with dates. Addresses. Phone numbers. Notes. Then I found something else. A newspaper clipping folded between 2 pages. The headline made my stomach twist. The article was nearly 20 years old. A small photograph accompanied it. The image was grainy. But the second I saw the man's face, I nearly dropped the notebook. Because despite the poor quality, I could still recognize him. He looked exactly like me. Or more accurately, he looked exactly like the man in Sarah's wedding photographs. My pulse exploded. Thomas Walker. The name from Ryan's notebook. The man from the article. The man who apparently shared my face. I quickly scanned the story. According to the article, Thomas Walker had been investigated years earlier for using multiple identities. But the case had fallen apart due to missing evidence. Missing evidence. Those words felt familiar. Hospital records missing. Birth records missing. Legal files missing. Every road seemed to lead back to the same thing. Someone had spent decades hiding the truth. Then my phone rang. I nearly jumped. The caller ID showed my mother. I answered immediately. Mom. Her voice shook. Daniel, where are you? At Ryan's apartment. Silence. Then panic. Leave. What? Leave right now. My stomach tightened. Why? Before she could answer, another voice appeared in the background. My father. And he sounded terrified. He's gone. The words were muffled but clear. Gone. I felt ice run through my veins. What happened? My mother began crying. Then she delivered the news. Ryan disappeared. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. My mind simply refused to process the words. What do you mean disappeared? He came to the house after you left. My heart hammered. He knew. Knew what? The truth. Everything inside me froze. Ryan had known. Not suspected. No. For how long? Years? Decades? My father took the phone. Daniel, listen carefully. His voice sounded strained. Exhausted. Like a man finally running out of lies. Ryan isn't your best friend by accident. The room spun. What? Heavy silence filled the line. Then my father said the words that changed everything. Ryan is your brother. I nearly dropped the phone. The world seemed to stop moving. Brother. Not friend. Brother. No. It's true. My legs gave out. I collapsed into a chair. Ryan. My best friend. The person I trusted most in the world. The person who had stood beside me through every major moment of my life. My brother. The realization felt impossible. Yet somehow it explained everything. The photograph. The secrets. The guilt. The fear. The nervous behavior. Ryan hadn't been hiding the truth from a friend. He had been hiding it from his own brother. I closed my eyes. Tell me everything. My father sighed heavily. For several seconds, all I heard was breathing. Then he began. 30 years earlier, after the hospital scandal, several children had become entangled in a nightmare of missing records and mistaken identities. One of those children was me. Another was Ryan. And another was Thomas Walker. The three of us had been connected from the beginning. Connected by a mistake. Or perhaps something far worse than a mistake. As investigators dug deeper into the hospital records years later, they discovered evidence suggesting that some files had been intentionally altered. Names changed. Birth certificates replaced. Adoption paperwork modified. Nobody knew who had done it. Or why not? The investigation eventually collapsed. The records disappeared. And the truth vanished with them. Until now. I listened in stunned silence. Then one question surfaced above all others. Who altered the records? The line went quiet. My father's answer came slowly. Almost reluctantly. At the time, we thought it was someone inside the hospital. But. His silence told me everything. There was a but. A huge one. Finally he spoke. We were wrong. Every muscle in my body tightened. Then who? Another pause. Then a name. A name I never expected to hear. A name that made my blood run cold. Uncle Robert. The room spun. My uncle. My mother's older brother. The man who had attended every birthday. Every holiday. Every family gathering. The man sitting in the front row of my wedding. The man who hugged me before the ceremony. The man who claimed to love me like a son. No. My father sounded broken. We didn't learn the truth until years later. I couldn't breathe. My uncle? But none of it made sense. Then my father explained. And suddenly everything became horrifyingly clear. Robert had worked as an administrator at the hospital during the scandal. He had access to records. Access to names. Access to files. Access to everything. According to evidence Ryan had uncovered, Robert had been running an identity fraud operation for years. Not alone, but as part of a larger scheme. Children's records were valuable. Clean identities. Fresh histories. Perfect foundations for fraud. My stomach turned. Thomas Walker wasn't the mastermind. He had been a victim. Just like me. Just like Ryan. Robert had manipulated records. Created false identities. Moved children through the system. And covered his tracks for decades. The reason Sarah's husband carried my identity wasn't because he stole it. It had been given to him. By Robert. The reason hospital files vanished wasn't an accident. Robert destroyed them. The reason Ryan spent months acting terrified wasn't because he was guilty. It was because he was investigating his own family. And now he had disappeared. The realization hit me like a truck. Ryan hadn't been hiding from me. He had been trying to protect me. The same way my parents thought they were protecting me. The same way Sarah had been trying to uncover the truth. Every person in this story had been chasing the same answers. Every road led back to one man. Robert. My uncle. The trusted family member nobody suspected. The smiling man in the front row of my wedding. The man who had watched everything unfold without saying a word. Then another realization struck me. One that made my blood freeze. Robert knew the truth was coming out. He knew Ryan was investigating. He knew Sarah had arrived. He knew I was asking questions. And if Ryan had disappeared, then Robert might be running out of time. I grabbed my keys. Daniel, my father warned. What? Don't do anything stupid. I looked at the photograph lying on the floor. The message. The years of lies. My destroyed wedding. Sarah's ruined life. Ryan's disappearance. And the man responsible for all of it. I'm done waiting for answers. Then I hung up. Because there was only one thing left to do. Find Robert. And force the truth into the light. What I didn't know then was that Robert wasn't running. He wasn't hiding. In fact, he was preparing for something else entirely. Something that would destroy what remained of our family. Because while I was racing toward the truth, Robert had already decided who would take the blame. And his choice would shock everyone. I drove faster than I ever had in my life. Every red light felt like an enemy. Every minute felt like an hour. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. One thought repeated in my mind over and over. Find Robert. Find Ryan. And this. The address came from my father. A small lake house about an hour outside the city. A property Robert had owned for years. Most of the family barely knew it existed. According to my father, Robert often disappeared there whenever he wanted privacy. As I drove, I called Emily. No answer. I called again. Voicemail. Nothing. I couldn't blame her. From her perspective, the man she planned to marry had been exposed as either a liar or someone living inside a nightmare. Either way, trust had been shattered. Still, losing her hurt almost as much as everything else. By the time I reached the lake house, the sun was beginning to set. The sky glowed orange over the water. Under different circumstances, it would have been beautiful. Instead, it felt ominous. The house stood alone near the shoreline. Several cars were parked outside. My stomach tightened. I wasn't the first one there. I stepped out and immediately recognized Sarah's car. Then my father's. Then another vehicle. Ryan's. Relief flooded through me. Ryan was alive. At least I hoped he was. I rushed toward the front door. Before I could reach it, it opened. Sarah stepped outside. Her eyes widened. Daniel. Where's Ryan? Inside. Is he okay? She nodded. Barely. I pushed past her and entered the house. The scene inside looked like something out of a movie. My father stood near a fireplace. My mother sat crying on a couch. Ryan was there. Alive. Exhausted. But alive. The second he saw me, he stood. For several seconds we simply stared at each other. Neither of us knew what to say. Because everything had changed. Best friends. Brothers. Victims. Strangers. We were somehow all of those things at once. Then he finally spoke. I'm sorry. The words hit harder than I expected. I walked toward him. How long did you know? Ryan lowered his head. Most of my life. The room became silent. You knew and never told me? Tears appeared in his eyes. I wasn't allowed. By who? He looked toward the far corner of the room. And that's when I saw him. Robert. My uncle. The man responsible for everything. He sat calmly in a chair near the window. As if this were just another family gathering. As if he hadn't destroyed countless lives. The sight of him made my blood boil. I took a step forward. You did this. Robert sighed. Almost impatiently. As usual, everyone wants a simple villain. You stole my identity. No. You ruined Sarah's life. No. You destroyed my wedding. Robert laughed. A short, bitter laugh. The truth destroyed your wedding. I lunged toward him. Ryan grabbed my arm. Daniel. Let go. Not like this. My entire body shook with rage. Robert looked annoyingly calm. Almost relieved. Like he had been waiting for this moment. Then he did something unexpected. He stood. Slowly. Carefully. Like an old man carrying a burden for too many years. And for the first time, I noticed how tired he looked. Not frightened. Not guilty. Just tired. You all deserve the truth. Nobody spoke. Robert walked toward a large wooden table. Several folders rested on top. Stacks of records. Photographs. Legal documents. Evidence. Years of evidence. Ryan pointed at them. That's what I found. Robert nodded. Yes. Sarah stepped forward. You knew who I was. I did. You watched me search for years. I did. Tears streamed down her face. Why? Robert closed his eyes. For a moment, he looked genuinely ashamed. Then he began speaking. 30 years earlier, the hospital scandal had exposed something much larger than record errors. A criminal network had been using birth records to create false identities. Children became paperwork. Paperwork became money. And money made people dangerous. Robert discovered the operation while working at the hospital. At first, he reported it. Then everything went wrong. Threats followed. Bribes followed. People disappeared. Witnesses stopped talking. Investigations collapsed. Eventually Robert made a decision. A terrible decision. He began altering records himself. Not for profit. Not for power. To hide children from the criminals. The room froze. I stared at him. What? Robert nodded slowly. The original records made you targets. No. Yes. He pointed toward me. Daniel wasn't supposed to be Daniel. Then toward Ryan. Ryan wasn't supposed to be Ryan. Then toward Sarah. And the man you married wasn't supposed to be Thomas Walker. Silence filled the room. None of us knew what to say. Because suddenly the story had changed again. Not completely. But enough to be terrifying. Robert continued. The criminals wanted access to specific children. My stomach twisted. Why? Because their identities could be sold. The room fell silent. Robert sighed heavily. So I hid them. My father stepped forward. By changing records? Yes. Without telling anyone? Yes. Ryan shook his head. You played God. I know. Sarah wiped tears from her face. And my husband? Robert looked at her sadly. Thomas grew up believing he was Daniel. The words landed like a bomb. For years, Thomas had carried my identity. Not because he stole it. Because he genuinely believed it belonged to him. Because someone had rewritten his life before he was old enough to understand. Sarah sat down slowly. The realization shattered her. Everything she believed about her marriage had been built on lies. Not her lies. Not Thomas's lies. Someone else's. Robert's. Then I asked the question everyone feared. Where is Thomas now? The room became quiet. Too quiet. Robert's expression darkened. And immediately I knew I wasn't going to like the answer. He died. Sarah gasped. The room spun. What? Robert nodded. 3 years ago. Tears immediately filled Sarah's eyes. No. He was killed during a robbery. The world seemed to stop. 4 years Sarah had searched for her husband. Spent money. Destroyed relationships. Obsessed over finding answers. And all along, the man she loved had been dead. A sob escaped her throat. Ryan moved beside her, trying to comfort her. But there was no comfort for something like that. Only grief. Raw and overwhelming. Then another voice interrupted. My father. You still haven't explained everything. Robert looked away. My father stepped closer. What about the missing files? No answer. What about the money? Still nothing. Ryan suddenly froze. The color drained from his face. Then he looked directly at Robert. And whispered something that changed everything. You kept doing it. The room went silent. Robert didn't respond. Ryan stepped forward. His hands were shaking. You never stopped. A terrible realization spread through the room. Not just across my face. Across everyone's. Sarah. My father. My mother. Even Robert. Because suddenly we all understood. The original cover-up may have started with good intentions. But somewhere along the way, it became something else. Ryan pointed toward the files. I found the accounts. Robert remained silent. I found the transfers. More silence. I found the payments. Finally, Robert looked up. And for the first time all night, he looked guilty. Not tired. Not sad. Guilty. The room erupted. Because the truth was finally becoming clear. Robert had protected children. Maybe. But he had also profited. For years. The lies hadn't continued because they were necessary. They had continued because they were valuable. And that changed everything. Every justification. Every excuse. Every defense. Gone. Robert lowered his head. And in that moment, every person in the room knew the same thing. The man who claimed he was protecting us had become the very thing he claimed to fight. Nobody spoke for a long time after Ryan exposed Robert. The silence inside the lake house felt heavier than any argument. Heavier than any confession. Heavier than the truth itself. For years, Robert had convinced himself he was protecting people. Maybe, in the beginning, that had been true. Maybe he really had saved children from criminals. Maybe he really had prevented lives from being destroyed. But somewhere along the way, he crossed a line. And once he crossed it, he never came back. The lies grew. The records changed. The secrets multiplied. And eventually, those secrets became profitable. Lives became paperwork. Paperwork became money. And money became a reason to keep lying. Robert sat quietly at the table. Defeated. The confident man who had attended every family gathering was gone. What remained was an exhausted old man surrounded by the wreckage of his own decisions. Ryan handed a folder to my father. Inside were bank records, transfers, account statements, payments stretching back decades. The evidence was overwhelming. There was no denying it anymore. Robert finally looked up. Tears filled his eyes. I never meant for any of this to happen. Nobody responded. Because intentions no longer mattered. The damage had already been done. Sarah's marriage had been built on a false identity. My entire life had been shaped by hidden records. Ryan had spent years carrying secrets he never asked for. And my wedding had collapsed in front of everyone I loved. One decision. 30 years of consequences. Robert slowly stood. For a moment, I thought he was going to defend himself. Instead, he simply nodded, almost as if he understood that there was nothing left to say. Then he spoke. "I'm sorry." The words felt small. Pathetically small. How do you apologize for stealing decades from people? How do you apologize for rewriting lives? How do you apologize for turning truth into a lie? You can't. Not really. Within an hour, law enforcement arrived. Ryan had already contacted investigators before coming to the lake house. The evidence he'd collected was enough to reopen multiple cases. Robert didn't resist. He didn't argue. He didn't run. He simply surrendered. As officers escorted him outside, he paused near the doorway. For a second our eyes met. I expected anger. Or guilt. Or shame. Instead, I saw something else. Regret. The kind of regret that arrives years too late. Then he walked out of the house. And disappeared into the darkness. The following months were some of the hardest of my life. The investigation expanded rapidly. Old files were reopened. Missing records resurfaced. Former employees came forward. Witnesses who had remained silent for decades finally spoke. One by one, secrets emerged. Some families learned shocking truths. Others finally received answers they had spent years searching for. The process wasn't easy. In many cases, it was heartbreaking. Because sometimes the truth hurts more than the lie. Sarah struggled the most. Learning that Thomas had died years earlier nearly destroyed her. For weeks she barely spoke. The man she'd spent years searching for was gone. Not missing. Not hiding. Gone forever. And the life they shared had been built on an identity that never belonged to him. Yet despite everything, she never blamed him. Because Thomas had been a victim too. A child whose life had been rewritten before he could understand what was happening. A man who spent his entire life believing a lie. In many ways, he had suffered just as much as the rest of us. Eventually, Sarah and I became friends. Not because of what happened, but because we were among the few people who truly understood it. We had both lost something important. We had both been searching for answers. And we had both discovered that the truth was far more complicated than we ever imagined. As for Ryan, learning he was my brother felt surreal. For weeks, neither of us knew how to act around each other. We had spent nearly 30 years as best friends. Now we were supposed to process the fact that we shared blood. At first, it felt awkward, strange, unnatural. But eventually we realized something important. Nothing had really changed. Ryan was still the person who helped me through heartbreak. The person who stood beside me during the worst moments of my life. The person who never stopped trying to protect me. Brother or friend, he was still Ryan. And that was enough. The hardest part of all involved Emily. For months, we barely spoke. Not because she hated me. Because neither of us knew what to say. Our wedding day had become a public disaster. A nightmare recorded on dozens of phones. A story shared across social media. A memory impossible to escape. She needed time. Honestly, so did I. The truth was that neither of us were the same people anymore. The events of that day changed us. Maybe permanently. Nearly 6 months passed before we finally met again. A small coffee shop. Nothing dramatic. Nothing romantic. Just two people trying to understand what remained after the dust settled. Emily looked different. Not physically. Emotionally. Stronger somehow. Wiser. Maybe sadder. I probably looked the same. For a while we simply talked. No accusations. No arguments. Just honesty. The kind of honesty that had been missing from our lives for too long. Finally, she asked the question that mattered most. Did you know any of it? I looked directly into her eyes. No. She studied me for several seconds. Then nodded. I believe you. The words nearly broke me. Not because they fixed everything. Because they didn't. But because they mattered. Trust, once shattered, takes time to rebuild. Sometimes years. Sometimes forever. Emily and I didn't rush anything. We started over. Slowly. Carefully. One conversation at a time. And eventually, something unexpected happened. We found our way back to each other. Not immediately. Not magically. But genuinely. A year later, we got married. This time in a small ceremony. No giant guest list. No extravagant venue. No pressure. Just the people we trusted most. And before the ceremony began, the priest asked the traditional question. If anyone objects. The room burst into laughter. Even Emily laughed. Even I laughed. Because after everything we'd survived, there wasn't much left to fear. The truth was finally out. The lies were over. The secrets were gone. Or at least most of them. Sometimes people ask whether I regret learning the truth. The answer is complicated. The truth cost me my wedding. It cost me relationships. It cost me certainty. But it also gave me something valuable. My brother. Answers. Freedom. And the chance to build a future based on reality instead of hidden lies. The strange thing about betrayal is that it rarely comes from strangers. It usually comes from people you trust. People you love. People sitting closest to you. The people you never think to question. That's the lesson I learned from all of this. Not that strangers are dangerous. Not that family is untrustworthy. But that truth matters. Because secrets don't disappear. They grow. They spread. And eventually, they demand to be seen. The woman who called herself my wife wasn't the person who ruined my wedding. The person who ruined it had been sitting in the front row the entire time. And that's my confession.